And now from Washington, the Inside Scoop. All the news the government does not want you to hear. Now, here's your host on the Inside Scoop, Mark Levine.
Good evening, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. Welcome to Debate with a Republican, which I try to do at least once a week. I think it's good for the soul to try to understand the crazy people that are actually running this country. And someone who actually makes a lot more sense than our president, though that's not hard to do, is the guy sitting to my right. His name is Mike Lane. He is a Republican strategist and the president of Intelephant Strategies. Mike, it's always fun when you're on the show.
Mark, I'm going to do my best tonight to explain it all to you, but I fear I'm going to fail by the end of the night.
Well, my listeners have already, on the blog at RadioInsideScoop.com, have all kinds of questions for you. We will get to them. And folks, if you want to ask a question, it's easy to do. You can post on the blog at RadioInsideScoop.com, or you can call in live. The toll-free number's right there on the screen, 888-488-MARK. Lots to talk about. Last night on 60 Minutes, George Tenet, former CIA director, finally told us the truth. I wish he'd told us sooner, but really it's interesting that the stuff he told would have been really controversial 3-4 years ago. Things like there's absolutely no connection between Iraq and 9/11, things that he warned the president several times about 9/11 to do something about it, and Condoleezza Rice ignored him. And the fact that the president wanted to invade Iraq and all his neocons wanted to invade Iraq long before 9/11, all kinds of interesting information. I'm glad he said it. It's certainly something that those of us in the Democratic Party have known for years now. I think it's a little too late, but it does help to make the record clear that all those things that your party's been saying for so many years are out and out lies. Now we know that it's not a question of being misinformed, it's a question of out and out lies. And we can take them one by one.
Well, Mark, first of all, let me say I did the most difficult thing that I have done in 10 years, the last 10 years of my life last night, and that was I actually watched 60 Minutes. It was painful, it was horrible, but I did. So
I saw George
Tenet. I saw George Tenet. Let me just bring up Mary Mapes and Dan Rather. That's a good start. We won't degenerate there.
No, we won't talk about the fact that Dan Rather was right, even though the documents were forged.
Let me say that I found Tenet, for the most part, to be a fairly compelling subject to be interviewed on 60 Minutes. He was interesting, and for the most part, he was pretty credible. But there was one part that I thought his story fell apart on, and I don't think he quite said as much as you wanted to hear, but we'll get into that.
Well, let's just take it one by one, okay? He starts, and if you didn't see 60 Minutes, it's well worth your time to check it out. And also, of course, he's written a book, and it's all in connection with his book and so forth. And I'm not going to be too praiseworthy of George Tenet, because in my view, while he was very compelling last night, it could have made a difference 3 years ago. It could have made a difference before the 2004 election. Now we all know what he's saying is true. Now it's like, oh, well, thanks for telling us now. But let's deal with them one by one. First, he says that before 9/11, he warned George Bush many times. He even says he warned Bill Clinton as well, but that right in the summer of 2001 was the summer of threat, which we first learned about Americans with Richard Clarke, who talked about it before your friends in your party tried to trash him personally, which was very hard to do for an honorable man like Richard Clarke. But he talked about that he specifically pulled Condoleezza Rice aside, said that there's going to be multiple attacks on the United States at home, that the attacks are imminent, that you should expect mass casualties. Mass casualties. And what she did is she gave it to what he called a third-tier group to take a look at it. He wanted to go in and do something right away in Afghanistan. We've heard, by the way, that Samuel Berger, whatever you think of other stuff, he also told Condoleezza Rice to do something right away. Richard Clarke talks about a plan to involve the Northern Alliance to do something right away after the Cole bombing. What we've learned is that at least before 9/11, this was a president who was focused on Iraq, but really didn't want to confront al-Qaeda.
Okay, a couple things here, Mark. First of all, when Tenet said that he went to see then National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, he said he laid it out to her, and what did he want to do? Well, what he said last night, or what I got out of what he said last night that he wanted to do, was he wanted to depend on the same intelligence that the Democrats have been telling us for years is useless and what's with this. He wanted to depend on the intelligence, and he wanted to launch a preemptive strike against al-Qaeda and the Taliban. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to take the Taliban out and launch a preemptive strike based on the same intelligence, the same level of credibility the intelligence had that you and your friends have been complaining about for the past 5 years.
Well, Mike, you use the word preemptive strike.
That's what Tenet wanted to do.
And clearly, in some sense, it would be preemptive because Tenet had all this intelligence that al-Qaeda was going to do these attacks in the United States. But it wouldn't really be preemptive. Al-Qaeda had already attacked the United States, not just with the World Trade Center, but with the embassy bombings and with the bombings of the USS Cole. So whereas I have real problems under international law and with our view in the world of doing an attack on a country that had never attacked us, a country like Iraq, fighting Afghanistan before al-Qaeda attacked us would not only have been preemptive, it also would have been justified by the norms of international law. It would have been responsive. And therefore, although I grant you part of it would have been preemptive, it definitely wouldn't have had, I think, the nasty world reaction we've seen from our war in Iraq.
Well, I think it would have had a nasty reaction, but you know what? I don't care about the nasty world reaction. I think actually Director Tenet got this one right.
We can all agree in hindsight that we should have attacked Afghanistan.
That we should have attacked Afghanistan preemptively, but I say that and I establish the precedent that preemptive attacks have their place in this, and when you're depending on intelligence, which Director Tenet made a strenuous effort to say, look, this is an art. You look at the best pieces you can. It's never the complete puzzle. The mosaic is never complete, and then you make an estimate as to what you think is going to happen based on very partial information. Sometimes you can get it wrong. We might back then have gotten it wrong that they were going to attack us in September of '01. As it turned out, he was right. But if we got it wrong and launched a preemptive strike, I still would have been very, very supportive of it because I think it was the right thing to do based on the intelligence that we thought we had at the time.
Again, it's all characterization. I mean, as you know, Bill Clinton did attack Afghanistan in 1998 after our embassy bombings. At the time, you may recall that the Republican Party was up in arms. How dare we attack Afghanistan? The important thing is to focus on Monica Lewinsky's blue dress. You may recall that's exactly what people were saying in November of 1998 when we did attack Afghanistan. Obviously, in hindsight, it was the right thing to do. But the thing that strikes me is how many times he came to the president, how many times, he's not the only one who said this. Richard Clark came to the president.
No, he said.
Condoleezza Rice reads memo to bin Laden determined to attack the United States, and they all put on a back burner because they wanted to focus on Iraq.
My memory of last night's interview is that he actually said he did not go to the president.
Right.
He said, you have to understand
Rice.
how this things work in Washington. You don't go to the president on these things.
You go to Condoleezza
You go to somebody
Rice.
else.
And the president, as is his wont, rewarded Condoleezza Rice. She's now Secretary of State. He seems to always reward failure, including, for that matter, George Tenet with the Medal of Freedom. And I want to get to that in a second.
All right.
Let's move on, though, to Iraq. Very interesting stuff. What he says is that right after September 11th, literally on September 12th, as he put it, Richard Pearl comes up to him and says, Iraq has to pay a price for this.
Right.
At which point, Tenet looked at him like, what, are you crazy? Are you delusional? Same as Richard Clark, who also testified before Congress that the president said, Richard, we need to find a connection between Iraq and al-Qaeda. And Richard Clark said, Mr. President, there is none. He said, well, you can't just tell me that. Look it up. Richard Clark said, I've already looked it up. There is none. He made him write a report. Richard Clark wrote a report that says there was none. The president said it was unacceptable. Rewrite this. He rewrote the report, still saying there is none. George Tenet made it clear. Not only is there zero connection between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein, he said, even though the president said that al-Qaeda might do Saddam Hussein's dirty work, Tenet said, we never believed that. The intelligence never showed that. The president said, what if there were 19 hijackers armed by Saddam Hussein? Tenet said, we weren't telling the president that. In fact, he made it clear that there has never been a single operational act of the Iraqi government against United States civilians. I mean, there's our planes up there. There's never been an attack by Iraq. What struck me last night is how angry and forceful Tenet was, as we all should be, about the threat from al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda's allies. We should all be very, very strong against that threat. And the war against Iraq has not only taken our attention, but away from that real threat, but actually helped al-Qaeda by moving our attention away.
Well, I think Director Tenet was angry about a lot of things, including last night. I thought he was rather angry at the 60 Minutes interviewer who seemed to be questioning his integrity, questioning...
He was giving him a tough interview. I had no problem with that.
He came across, I thought he came across as very honest And 3 times the interviewer from 60 Minutes essentially called him a liar, and when they were discussing the torture issue. And Tenet said 3 times, let me make this as plain as I can. We do not torture people. And he goes, oh, sure you torture people.
Yeah,
3 times.
Right.
Well, we don't.
Yeah, we do.
You know,
because it all depends on what the definition of torture is. We all know that they're playing semantic games.
Waterboarding is not torture in my mind,
well,
and in Director Tenet's mind.
Let's be honest about it. You know, let's just say, let him say, all right, we did do waterboarding, but it's not torture. Or even what, even if you don't want to say what we did. Just define, is waterboarding torture or isn't it?
Tenet said last night he specifically said waterboarding is not torture.
No, he didn't. He didn't answer the question. He said, I'm not going to talk about techniques, but we didn't torture anybody.
You have to listen carefully.
But you changed the topic.
It was one of those comments that was talked over by the interviewer as they were both talking at the same time. If you listen to Tenet real closely at that point, he does say waterboarding is not torture.
I'll listen again. I don't think he said
it was
that.
in there.
But I want to get back to my original point, which is this was an administration, as we've now learned, as no one can doubt, that fixes the facts around the intelligence. The intelligence was Iraq was not a threat. In terms of nuclear weapons, even their bad intelligence said it was at least 5 to 7 years away. Cheney's claiming it certainly occurs. He said the evidence was not beyond a reasonable doubt. Maybe it would work in a civil trial, not a criminal trial. This is the information that was given to the president.
Right.
And we know that the president or Dick Cheney, probably Dick Cheney, Richard Pearl, Wolfowitz, and their allies decided we're going to go to war based on this. And the question is, why didn't they tell the American people what Tenet was telling them? Give us the intelligence and say, look, we think Iraq could be a threat in the future, 5 to 7 years, and for that, we want to waste 3,000 American lives and hundreds of billions of dollars. Let the American people decide. Instead, selling the war to us was the slam dunk Tenet was talking about, not actually doing the war.
Oh, well, that's the part where the credibility, I think, breaks down. And we'll go back to that probably
we'll get back to it
after the break. Let me say, to say that they were hell-bent on attacking Iraq from the beginning.
They were.
Based on, right now, the single comment of Richard Pearl.
Single comment?
Based on the single comment.
Do you want more evidence? Because I have a lot more evidence.
How much did we see last night other than Richard Pearl saying, being reported by Tenet as saying, Iraq's got to pay for this? That's the only thing he said in 40 minutes that indicated there was one person who was interested in getting Iraq for this.
You can't take George Tenet in a vacuum. There's George Tenet's comments. There's Richard Clark's comments about how the president ordered him to go back 3 times and find a connection that wasn't there. There's Paul O'Neill, former Treasury Secretary, all good, loyal Republicans who wrote in Ron Suskind's book, actually provided us the map on January 30th, 2001, 10 days into office, when Bush is busy dividing up the oil fields. British Petroleum gets this, Mobil gets this. You can't take Tenet's comments in a vacuum. That plus the Downing Street memo, every single piece of evidence makes it clear they were fixing the facts around the intelligence. That's why I thought Tenet didn't really say anything new. I was convinced of this long before Tenet. It was just confirmation.
Everyone in the world, every intelligence agency knew in their intelligence estimates that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction, that he had the chemical weapons, and that he was pursuing the nuclear weapons.
No.
That was what we knew at the time.
They thought he had chemical and biological weapons. He wasn't. He didn't know it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Listen to Colin Powell. Listen to Colin Powell at the United Nations.
Colin Powell
they all knew
regrets what he said at the United Nations.
Everybody regrets it now.
And so does George Tenet.
Everybody regrets it now.
And so should you. But if you want to call in and challenge Mike or me, it's easy to do. Join in the conversation. We will let you get a word in edgewise, even if we don't let ourselves get a word in edgewise from time to time. Toll-free number, 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Comment on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. We'll be right back after this. In many ways, the stuff that Tenet raised is all old. It's old
History
news
has
to me.
demonstrated that violence only begets greater violence. And injustice only begets greater injustice. This is not the tradition of our great nation. This is not how we want the United States to be known around the world. We have another tradition that we think ought to prevail. one that is more just and more powerful. There is a better way. If we truly want peace and security, then we must work hard for justice. If you're concerned that we've become a nation whose national policies are grounded in beliefs that are centered on a line embedded in BS, then don't miss Escape from Orwellia Nation, a talk show in which concerned regular citizens like you and me, not self-serving media spinmeisters, wade through the barrage of newspeak and doublethink that pollutes public discourse today. Big brother, big business, big media, and the big national parties who collude to keep we the people afraid and in the dark would prefer that you not watch. Show them who's in charge. Tune in to Escape from Orwellia Nation right here on Channel 10.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm debating the issues of the day with Mike Lane, Republican strategist. And as you know, I used to work on the Hill for the Democrats, so we get nice bipartisanship here, I guess. Mike, what strikes me about all the debates that we just had in the last segment and about what George Tenet said last night, it's old news to me. It's amazing that Democrats and independents long ago knew there was no connection between Iraq and Afghanistan. They long ago knew Iraq didn't have nuclear weapons and wasn't an imminent threat. And long ago knew that weapons of mass destruction scare tactics, even though he didn't have chemical and biological weapons, what, some 100 nations on Earth have chemical weapons? I mean, mustard gas was used in World War I. The heart of what Tenet said last night was Saddam Hussein was not a strong threat against the United States. He was a threat like, Libya was a threat. There are little countries that we don't like that do things we don't like, and he's a bad guy. Lots of them around the earth. But the real threat was al-Qaeda. And the heart to me of what made George Tenet so upset and what has made Democrats and independents so upset over the last 4 years is we've taken our eye off the ball of al-Qaeda in order to focus on this, gnat, this mosquito that is Saddam Hussein. And ironically, by removing that dictator, we've actually made the situation worse in Iraq than it was when he was around.
Well, okay, a couple things. Number one, there's been a lot of criticism of the president and the military effort to catch and actually contain Osama bin Laden. Now, you heard George Tenet last night say, look, that's not the way it works. You don't corner anybody in Tora Bora. That's not what the terrain's all about. That's not, his words exactly.
We didn't have enough troops.
No. His words exactly. You don't corner anybody in Tora Bora. That's not the way the terrain reads. Those were his words exactly.
Yes, but he also said that he was in charge of that effort. He was the first. In fact, they called it the first war the CIA ever led.
Right.
So he is particularly, if you will, responsible then for Osama bin Laden escaping. This is where he's really going to bend over backwards to try to protect himself. What he said is we didn't have enough people there. And I think that's right. I think we didn't have enough people there. And I think we still don't have enough people there because we're spending 10 times as much money and manpower in Iraq.
Well, again, we've got, the exact number is classified. We've got roughly 15,000 troops, the vast majority of them special forces.
And 10 times the number in Iraq.
The vast majority of them special forces. The Russians found out when they were at war with Afghanistan that you don't win with conventional troops in the mountains of Afghanistan. You need special forces. That's the only way to fight the war. 15,000 may or may not be a good number of special forces, but you don't want to put division after division in there. You can't roll tanks through those mountains. It doesn't work.
But the heart of the problem with the Bush administration, as you well know, has nothing to do with Afghanistan. I mean, I can complain, I think rightly, that he should have recognized the al-Qaeda threat prior to that becoming a threat, prior to 3,000 Americans dying. But the heart of the question is when we have this most vicious attack on American soil, really since, by a foreign power, since the War of 1812 that I can think of.
Since anything.
It's worse than Pearl Harbor. That's the guy you focus on. And yet it is clear, to use your words, the administration was hell-bent on going after Iraq. And that's the thing that I think...
they weren't hell-bent on going after Iraq. That's what I said.
How can you say that? How can you say that with with what Tenet says about Pearl, with what Richard Clarke says, with what Ron Suskind's book about Paul O'Neill says, with all the evidence that this government.
First of all, Paul O'Neill was Secretary of the Treasury. He was hardly in on the War Council.
His map.
You know,
There's a map. What are you going to do with that map? The map that they tried to put him in jail for disclosing a top secret map. Why 10 days after George Bush is president is he spending his time, his first 10 days in office, dividing up Iraqi oil fields? There's no good answer for that, Mike. You can't give me one.
I wasn't there.
Exactly. You can't give me an answer for that. It is indefensible.
I don't think Paul O'Neill's credibility is the highest of anybody in this entire
But you can't say that Paul O'Neill, Republican Secretary of Treasury,
I know he is
incredible.
Richard Clarke, chairman,
Richard Clarke, the terrorism czar, the guy that Dick Cheney said, take over the White House while I dive underneath, appointed by Reagan and Bush and Clinton and Bush, is incredible. And George Tenet is incredible. Plus,
no, I didn't say George Tenet was. I said George Tenet had for the most part, a lot of credibility last night.
Richard Pearl has never denied that he's made those comments.
Oh no, I think Richard Pearl did say it. Obviously,
the president has never denied that he told Richard Clarke 3 times to try to find some tiny connection between Afghanistan and Iraq.
Right.
He hasn't denied it either. It is now 4 years after the president got on a ship and declared mission accomplished.
Everybody,
and it's very clear now that the war in Iraq had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda or Afghanistan or 9/11. Can we agree on that?
What we can agree on is that every intelligence estimate around the world put weapons of mass destruction, chemical capabilities, and pursuing nuclear capabilities in Saddam Hussein's hands back in 2000 and 2001. That's what every intelligence. That's what every intelligence thing did.
What Condoleezza Rice said is there's a mushroom. We have to act now before there's a mushroom cloud. Dick Cheney said he already has nuclear weapons. They tried to scare us to go into war, and what George Tenet said is it's a slam dunk to convince the public to go to war. What he didn't say is it's a slam dunk that Iraq has these weapons.
That is the single piece of Tenet's presentation last night that I found to be incredible, to really lack it. When they asked him about the comment about the slam dunk, he tried to twist it and turn it. You could tell his body language was different, his voice was different, his facial expressions were different. He was trying to twist it into saying, well, I didn't really say that the intelligence is a slam dunk that they have the weapons of mass destruction. What he tried to say last night, unconvincingly to me, was that when we need to make this presentation out in the public, it will be a slam dunk to make the presentation convincingly. Oh man, talk about a weak effort to justify your comments. That was the biggest lack of credibility
as you say,
in the whole thing last night.
But he followed up that comment to say, it's if they needed me to convince them to go to war. And that was compelling. There's no question that they used Tenet as the fall guy, but they were determined to go to war come hell or high water. They were going to invade Iraq, whether 9/11 happened or not, whether there was evidence of any kind or not, whether our allies wanted to or not. Saddam Hussein could open up all his palaces, bring in all the inspectors. These were people that were going to invade Iraq no matter what. That, I think, is now clear before all of history.
If Tenet was so clear on what he meant by that, why did he not testify as to what he meant when he was under oath in front of Congress in the summer of 2003, and when he was under oath in front of the panel?
They didn't ask him about the slam dunk
independent panel.
Then.
He could have.
I don't think Woodward's book was out at that time. But no, I agree. He should have talked earlier. I said at the very outset, this is a guy who should have told us these things earlier. Let me ask you this:
you think maybe that really there's not as much there, and they're trying to sensationalize this and make it look good? And why would they try and sensationalize it? I can give you 4 million reasons why they're trying to make it look good.
I consider George Tenet a yes man. I'm not a big fan of George Tenet. I think he was a yes man to Bill Clinton and a yes man to George Bush. I think he tells presidents what they want to hear because he's learned, like all too many people in Washington, if you want to keep your job in Washington, you tell the president what he wants to hear, whether it's true or whether it's false. Richard Clarke told the truth. He was kicked out on his ear. Joe Wilson told the truth, and his wife was outed as a CIA agent in the most traitorous act done by a vice president of the United States since Aaron Burr.
Okay, first of all, we know that it was an inadvertent discussion by Richard Armitage over at the State Department.
Was Karl Rove inadvertent? Was Dick Cheney inadvertent?
Karl Rove was not the source. Richard Armitage was the source.
There were several sources of this smear campaign.
Richard Armitage was the source, and Robert Novak has testified under oath that
Richard Armitage was
an inadvertent
source. It may well be that Richard Armitage was inadvertent. Okay,
he was the
source.
But
you're not going to deny that Dick Cheney had a coordinated campaign to disgrace Joe Wilson and to do so by outing his wife and told Scooter Libby to do it. You're not really going to deny that, are you?
I think
you're not going to deny that Karl Rove had a concerted campaign to out a CIA agent, to ruin one of our hardworking agents and all the people whose lives are in danger because she's a covert operative, which, by the way, was also established last night.
I don't think so.
He said it was a covert operative. Everyone has said it.
He did not say that.
Yes, he did. Everyone has said it. Patrick Fitzgerald has said it. There's no dispute about that. The part of the matter is there any justification for the President of the United States destroying an intelligence asset just in order to try to get the American people to believe in a lie? Why did they put that lie in the first place? Tenet took it out twice, and they snuck it in a third time. Why was this administration so hell-bent on lying to the American people, trying to persuade them that Iraq was going to nuke New York when everyone knew it wasn't true?
Well, we didn't know it wasn't true.
Sure we did.
As Tenet said, the estimate is an incomplete mosaic. You're looking at it, what do you have?
Tenet told them it wasn't true.
No.
All the intelligence sources said it wasn't true. All the European intelligence sources said it wasn't true.
No, absolutely not. The British
took it back.
But not when it was delivered, they didn't take it back.
Yes, they did, and so did the Italians who gave them that document.
The George Tenet did...
He took it out twice.
He did take it out twice.
Now, why did they sneak it back in? Why were they so determined to sneak back in something they knew to be false?
Speechwriters write a lot of things, Mark. They're sitting there writing the best thing they can, and it gets staffed out to the various agencies. I mean, you've been around this for a long time. It gets staffed out. It's up to the people who know it to
so
say...
basically, the president's going to lie. The president's going to lie, and it's up to the CIA to catch him in that lie. And if the president gets away with a lie, we can't blame the president for lying. We blame the CIA for not catching him when he tries the third time.
The president's not going to lie. The president depends on the information that the people who work for him and work for the government, work for the American people, give him.
And those people have been rewarded.
And if you're not getting the best information, if the best information you have is somebody who's reading a partial mosaic and gets it wrong, then you're going on incorrect information.
Stephen Hadley and Condoleezza Rice and Richard Pearl and Paul Wolfowitz and Dick Cheney were determined to sneak that "we're all going to die by a nuclear weapon" into that State of the Union speech. And every time they tried to take it out, and every time they snuck it back in, and I don't think you can justify that.
Interestingly, it wasn't that memorable a line during the speech when it was given. It's only in retrospect, after we're looking at this whole thing.
It was memorable in that you ask anyone why we went to war with Iraq, and they will tell you
it was to enforce United Nations resolutions.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah.
I want to hear from you folks. Do you think we went to war in Iraq? When you went to war in Iraq in 2002, do you think we went there to enforce United Nations resolutions? Or do we go there to stop Iraq from being a nuclear threat against the United States? They used that argument recently, but I don't recall Dick Cheney in 2002 saying, we must go to war with Iraq right now to enforce United Nations resolutions. If they were so important, we'd be stopping the genocide in Darfur. Give us a call, 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. We'll be right back after this.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, wake up. It's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
If you give me a fish...
If you give someone a fish...
You feed them for a day.
Teach someone to fish.
You feed them for a lifetime.
Give me a fish, and you'll feed me for a day. Teach me to fish, and you'll feed me for a lifetime.
Through Volunteers of America, you can help change lives in your community.
Oh,
Hey, mister, studied algebra in school and got a better job than I could. You take the last cup.
Oh, no, mister. Stuck in an entry-level job because you only learned basic math. I don't have a boss riding my butt like you do, so you take it so you can get back to your desk.
You know, I probably should, but maybe Miss AP Calculus with the $200 haircut in the big office upstairs would like a cup.
Oh, no, mister. What was your name again? Never mind, it doesn't matter. I'm too busy doing important things to care. I just came down for some sweet and start.
You know, if my limited math abilities weren't keeping me from getting a better job, I'd quit this afternoon.
I don't blame you. But thank goodness you're stuck here because we really need someone to make the coffee.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm discussing the news of the week. If you want to join in the conversation, it's easy to do. Toll free, 888-488-MARK. My guest is Mike Lane, Republican strategist. Mike, however we got into Iraq, it's a big mess. It's a real problem. And the Democrats, as you know, have passed a bill with a very little Republican support. Senator Hagel, there were a few Republicans.
Senator Hagel and Senator Smith from Oregon, I think, were the two.
There were very few. Lieberman went with the Republicans, and those two Republicans went with the Democrats. Got 51 votes to leave Iraq, to say that we should leave by July or at the latest October, but we'll give funding for the president in order to do so. And what I find interesting is the Democrats, there's talk about compromise, about, well, if you don't want a date certain, let's do benchmarks. Let's see if the Iraq government can reach a benchmark, and and if not, then we'll withdraw our troops. Bush says absolutely no compromise, none whatsoever. And then the front page of the Post today completely sickened me. Maliki, the Iraqi prime minister, who is a Shiite, apparently is purging people in the military, in his military, that are doing a good job at attacking the Shia terrorists, because he only wants to go after the Sunni terrorists. The only thing worse than a genocide, and standing by while a genocide occurs, to me would be to have American troops unwittingly help the genocidaires. And it seems to me that Maliki is out to make Iraq a Shiite country. I don't want any part of it. I don't want any part of it.
I think that's a stretch. There are a lot of things internal to Iraqi politics that we don't know about, we don't understand, and make it difficult for him to hold together the coalition that he's looking for. What I particularly like about what he's done is that he's tossed over his old buddy, the guy who put him in office, al-Sadr, is now, hiding like a little coward over in Iran, and, his people all left the government and things like that.
We'll see. The government is corrupt from top to bottom.
Well, as the whole culture over there is corrupt,
right? And yet we are losing thousands of lives. I mean, we are losing hundreds.
They're trying. They're making progress.
Month.
They're making. It's frustratingly slow.
Frustratingly
slow, but they're making progress.
4 years ago, the president said mission was accomplished.
That was.
Since then, every 2 months, he said we're making progress. He will say we're making progress for the next 57 years if he were president, and we would still lose thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of Iraqi lives, hundreds of billions of dollars. The war is over. We lost.
Well, I will absolutely disagree with you there. The war is not over until the general hands his sword over to the opposing general and surrenders.
There is no opposing general.
Yes, there is.
This is not like a battleship in Japan where Hirohito surrenders. There's Sunnis and there's Shiites. And you know what? The Shiites, as the majority, think they can beat the Sunnis. And the Sunnis, who used to rule Iraq, they think they can beat the Shiites. And both of them want to kill each other. And we, our GIs, struggling hard to live and survive, are standing in the middle.
Mark,
and I remember a million people dying in the 1980s when the Shiites and the Sunnis fought each other, and the only good thing you can say about that awful war is we weren't in the middle of it.
All right. First of all, General Petraeus still has a lot of optimism and a lot of hope that things are going to be going well
and if
militarily
he didn't, he'd be
in Iraq.
fired and we get someone else who has optimism.
And I'm going to tell you, when it comes to military matters and strategy, I'm going to put my faith in General Petraeus.
Why not? He's the seventh general to try.
And not in Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, who have never worn the uniform, don't know what they're talking about, don't have any appreciation for what military service is all about.
In President Bush, who refused a direct order because he was high on cocaine, and Dick Cheney, who was too busy driving.
Now, if you want to go with Cisco Nancy and
you want to go with generals? Let's talk about Eric Shinseki. Let's talk about all the generals that were offered the war czar.
Let's talk about the general that's there now. The general that's there now
Yeah.
is a guy named Petraeus.
Right. And he knows that if he doesn't say yes, sir, he'll be out on his ear.
He knows it's going better than it was. We have a new strategy. We have new strategy and new tactics. We're taking the fight to them. And we will know, he says, by the fall, September, October, as to whether or not this new strategy is going to work.
And if it's not working in the fall?
If it's not working and it shows no potential of working, then I'm with you. I think we've run out of ideas.
Then we pass the Democratic bill.
No.
The Democratic bill gives us till October.
No,
That's
because
the
you
fall.
do that. You do that.
And then if it's all working well and Iraq becomes this beautiful, shining democracy where they have at least as much electricity as they had under Saddam Hussein and people are singing and hugging and singing Kumbaya, then everyone will change their minds and they'll say you were absolutely right.
Let's say,
I don't think that's going to happen.
Let's say it's making progress. It looks like it's working, but it's going to require another 3 to 5 year commitment.
Means? What does it mean? The president says it every month.
It means
every month we're making progress.
Making progress
and every month, I think we're going backwards.
Making progress means that we're getting more help and cooperation from the indigenous population. They're ratting out the terrorists rather than ratting us out to the terrorists.
Mike, the amazing thing to me is that the way the Republicans look at this war, they actually think that it's our troops against some insurgents. They actually, I don't know if you actually believe that that's what's going on. It's an amazing thing to me because that's not what's going on. What's going on is Shias are trying to kill Sunnis. Sunnis are trying to kill Shias. They're both angling for who's going to be in control when we leave. And it's not us against them, it's both of them against each other and against us. That's why we're building walls between Shia and Sunni that apparently neither the Shia nor the Sunni want.
And let me say that for them to have a chance to succeed, we've got to be able to tamp down the violence.
Who?
The
Shia
Iraqi
or
government.
The Sunni?
The Iraqi government.
The Iraqi government. So the Shia.
The Iraqi government.
So the Shia, you want the Shia to trump the Sunni.
It's a joint government.
It's not a joint government.
It is a joint government.
They won't share oil with the Sunnis.
It's a federation. They will.
They won't
even. They will.
You know what?
They will.
For 2 years, they've promised provincial elections. One of the things provincial elections do, as you know, just as in our country, is it allows the outlying states to have a little bit of power. Provincial elections would give the Sunnis and the Kurds some stake in their country. But they're not going to do it, and they haven't done it. Why haven't they done it? Because they want the Shia majority to rule over the Sunni and the Kurds. And I say, it's not our battle. This is an ancient Islamic war. I don't want to fight on either side. And frankly, what really scares me is Iran, which is a Shia government, and Dick Cheney, and I'm not saying he did this on purpose, but Dick Cheney has done more to help the government of Iran than any American president in history. He has taken away their enemy to the right, Afghanistan, their enemy to the left, Saddam Hussein, taken away all their Sunni enemies, and made Iran one of the most powerful states in the United States. Ahmadinejad should every day pray to Allah that Dick Cheney has helped him so much.
All right. Well, first of all, you're not going to have the possibility of a stable government that provides peace and security for the Iraqi people while there's a war going on. If we can tamp down the violence and let them negotiate their political settlements while the violence is being tamped down, then they've got a chance. But Mark, if you pull out and you let them disintegrate into civil war, number one, they've got zero chance of a political settlement, which is what you keep telling me you want.
I do want a political settlement.
And number two, the destabilization of that state will export into the entire region, and you will have such chaos and violence in the entire Middle East, not contained just to Iraq, that we don't even want to dream about what that world's going to be like.
They've had 4 years.
Right, and we'll take 4 more and then 8 more after that if we need it.
US troops there. Here's an idea. Let's say you have until October to reach a political settlement. If not, we leave. And, you know, it's your choice. It's your country.
You never show...
You know, I got to say something. You know, it's just like my taxes, which I've been working on even past the extension deadline. When the deadline comes, you start getting to work. I'm afraid I was like this in college as well. When the paper is due, you stay up all night and you get it to work. If the Iraqis know that we're not going to be there for the next 30 years, we do plan to leave. We don't plan to spend all of our tax money and our children's tax money on trying to build a country when they're trying to knock it down. If they know we're going to leave, maybe they'll reach a political settlement. And if they don't, that's their country, their choice.
That's something that you quietly and diplomatically tell them when you're working with them towards achieving a solution to the problem. It's not something.
That's why that bill would really
help. You never
help.
reveal your plans to your enemy. And what you're doing is you're taking our battle plan and you're giving it to the enemy.
Who's our enemy?
The terrorists in Iraq that are attacking us every single day.
You're wrong.
Yes.
In Iraq, the terrorists are not that big a factor.
If the terrorists are not attacking us, then why are we losing people?
Because they're killing each other. Al-Qaeda wasn't even in Iraq.
But they're there now.
But they're there now.
Yes,
but
they
you know what
are.
just happened in Anbar province? The people of Anbar province, who are also Sunnis, as Al-Qaeda is Sunnis,
Right.
got so tired of Al-Qaeda requiring all kinds of religious fatwas and so forth that they themselves took out Al-Qaeda, and I think that's terrific.
And they are cooperating with the Marines who are in Anbar province, and that whole thing is turned around. It used to be the worst part of it, and now it's almost the best part, because what the Marines are doing over there, no, not without the Marines there, it'll disintegrate again unless you have the security necessary, the security provided by the military forces of the coalition.
Look,
unless you do that, it isn't going to work.
We can only be so many places in the world.
You can't have a political settlement without security, Mark. It doesn't work.
There are so many places in the world that need a political settlement. To me, my heart cries out for Darfur right now, where men, women, and children are being massacred. We don't care about them. They're African, they're black, and I guess there's not enough oil in Darfur. Iran is a very dangerous threat. North Korea is a threat. There are all kinds of threats. Al-Qaeda is still alive and well, and at least according to George Tenet, plotting to get a nuclear bomb, and that is a real threat, as we know. In fact, it's the reason why I think most Americans wanted the war in Iraq, because they believed Dick Cheney that there was going to be a nuclear weapon.
Which is another good reason to have Iran surrounded. If they're working on
the
nuclear weapons,
Iran now.
We've got troops in Afghanistan. We've got troops in Iraq. We've got them surrounded.
Our troops are helping.
And you pull them out.
Iran.
You know, you do what you want to redeploy them to Stillwater, Oklahoma. That's fine. But then Iran can do whatever it wants to do.
Our troops are helping Iran. They're helping Iran right now because they're helping a Shiite government persecute the Sunni population. And it's not like I have this great sympathy for the Sunni population. Heck, they persecuted the Shiites and Kurds when they were in control. I don't have sympathy for either of them. I think they all need to try to get along, and if they don't, we need to just get out. You know what's interesting? I'm actually reminded to some extent of when Israel became a state. The British were in the middle there, and the Jews wanted to have a Jewish state. The Arabs wanted the Jews out. They wanted an Arab state. They were killing each other. The British were trying to stop it, and they both just started killing the British, frankly, until the British left, and then they fought it out and came to a partition. That's how it worked. That's how this war will never end, ever. If we're there 5 years, if we're there 10 years, if we're there 30 years, the day we leave, the Shia and the Sunni are going to fight and try to get control of that state.
You may be right, but it's premature to conclude that. The evidence is that it can still work.
Every year it's premature. Every year it's premature. 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. How much are you willing to spend? How many lives, how many American lives are going to be lost before this war is over?
I wouldn't put
How many are going to be wounded?
I wouldn't put a number on it.
How much time is this going to go?
I wouldn't put a number on it. You stay in there while you've got a probability of success, and you go for it until it's clear that it doesn't work.
Hey, Mr.
And it's
Fiscal
not there yet.
How about taxing the rich and making them pay for this war? If we're going to spend
everyone
benefits.
This is not a soak the rich scheme. You know, everyone pays taxes
for
national security.
How come we're not paying any taxes to support this war?
Everyone pays taxes for national security.
Our children and our children's children are going to have to pay twice the amount of taxes tomorrow to fund the war. If President Bush feels this war is so important, how about if he goes to ExxonMobil and says, you know what, you've made huge profits from this war, let's do a windfall profits tax so that at least we're fighting this war, we're losing American lives so you can get your cheap oil. How about we're funding some of that to the government? He won't do that, will he?
Mark, as you know, I have been a critic of the deficits run by this administration from the time they started.
So you're willing to raise taxes to support this war?
No, but I think there's a lot of spending we can cut that'll get the deficit
under
control.
Wait. You're not willing to raise taxes to support this war. Basically, what you're saying is that if we're going to have this war, we need to cut other things. Social Security. Let old people starve. We got to fight the war in Iraq. Don't raise taxes on the rich. We got to fight the war in Iraq. What would you cut? We have $300 billion to fight this war in Iraq so far. It's going up. What would you cut?
Let's start with capping everything, and then each individual thing has to be specifically approved to go up. Just cap non-defense spending right now.
And as the baby boomers retire, everything's capped.
Cap non-defense spending right now.
They just won't get Social Security. And the kids might not get an education. And,
come on.
We won't have money
Who's
for
not going to get an education? Everyone gets an education.
The point is we have to make choices. And this war in Iraq was a lousy, awful choice. You know what's really scary? We're not fighting for democracy. The way we support Putin in Russia, the way we support dictators.
I don't think we're all that supportive of Putin anymore.
Egypt.
You know, there was a time when we made that mistake, but it's not there anymore.
It wasn't for Al-Qaeda. It wasn't for weapons of mass destruction. There's only one reason we fought this war, Mike, and it has 3 letters. I bet you know what those letters are.
Well,
I think our folks can guess them themselves. Toll free, 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. Right back after this.
George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
Let's impeach the president for life.
My name is David Bell. I am a resident of Virginia's 11th Congressional District, and I ask Representative Tom Davis to initiate or support investigations into violations of the law by President Bush and his administration.
Tom Davis, my name is Jean Reynolds, and I'm one of your constituents. I want you to join immediately with other members of Congress to begin an investigation of the criminal acts that George Bush has committed.
I'm Nick Spangler of Ashland, Virginia, and I would like our troops to come home and Bush to get out of office.
My name is Nancy Maynard. I live in the 11th Congressional District, and this message is for Tom Davis. I'm asking you to please investigate for impeachment.
My name is Bruce Smith. I live in the 11th Congressional District in Woodbridge, Virginia. I want Congressman Davis to support the investigation of President Bush and Vice President Cheney and those that foisted this war on us.
Hello, Congressman Davis. I'm Carrie Plonson from the 11th Congressional District, and I'd like you to take immediate action to investigate George Bush and his offenses in leading this country into a war that's unwarranted and there is no solution for.
We have to impeach. I am just appalled that we would not, quote, waste our time with impeachment. The message to the world has to be that Bush and Cheney are guilty of international war crimes about which we can't do anything. We can do a lot about the crimes committed within the U.S. Constitution.
From Washington, back to the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. You may think from the tone and tenor of my debate with Republican strategist Mike Lane that you won't be able to get a word in edgewise. I assure you it's not true. There's still time left if you want to call in live, challenge Mike or me or both of us. You're welcome to do so. The toll-free number is on your screen. If you don't want to try to talk over us, but you want to write your comments down, it's easy to do. It's on the blog at radioinsidescoop.com. And Mike, we have a whole host of questions already. Not so much dealing with Iraq, but about what is left being a Republican these days. Let me read these questions because I think they're very interesting. This is from Robert. And Robert writes, what exactly does it mean to be a Republican these days? I mean, what are the core beliefs? Is there any at all? Republicans used to and still may speak of fiscal responsibility and family values. So how do we get to such a national debt under Republican rule? The Plan B prescription plan, war contractors. Most of all, can anyone tell me who exactly ordered pallets of taxpayer money in cash to be loaded and sent to Iraq without requiring receipts? I really, really want to know who gave that specific order and whose idea by name, please. Let's deal with his comments one by one. He raises a lot of good comments, and I want to get to more from Robert in just a second. But in terms of what Republicans believe, I mean, fiscal responsibility